Ultimately, what we're talking about is breaking up centralized silos in order to incentivize people to become infrastructure providers.
Yeah, I'm not going to give these companies my data or whatever. And, my retort to that is always, well, you're doing it already.
Right. You're providing all the data from your smartphone usage, but you're not rewarded for that. So what we have with DePIN is an incentive mechanism that allows you to actually monetize the value that you're already creating in the real world, but that is at the moment only going to the 1%.
Being a DePIN focused layer allows us to do things like provide infrastructure, provide tooling, provide features to DePIN projects that they can't find anywhere else. Because you can come in and you can truly work with other projects in the ecosystem, or the Peaqosystem as I like to call it.
Hey friends, thanks for tuning in to the Andy and Friends podcast. I'm your friend Andy, and on this episode of the podcast, I'm talking with Martin and James from the team over at the Peaq Network. Peaq is a layer 1 just for DePINs. So we talk all about what they're doing, what they're building, what their features are, their entire ecosystem. We also dig more into DePIN at large and talk about what our favorite projects are in the DePIN space, specifically built on Peaq, why DePIN even makes sense, why it matters, why it's worth paying attention to, and a whole bunch of other stuff that we dug into in this really fun combo. So let's jump into it. And here we are on this episode, joined with a few friends from Peaq. And then if you guys could just kind of introduce yourselves, what you do at Peaq. Maybe we'll start with you, James.
Yeah, I'm James. I'm the community manager with Peaq Networks in EOT Labs.
Thanks for having us. My name is Martin, and I'm head of ecosystem at Peaq.
Yeah. Very cool. So I know what Peaq is. Probably some people who watch my channel and probably who watch the podcast know what Peaq is. But for those who don't, if either of you or both of you could kind of give us a overview of Peaq from top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, in short, Peaq is the home of DePIN. So DePIN is decentralized physical infrastructure networks. And we are a layer 1 that is focused on, building the infrastructure and creating a network for DePINs to call home.
Yeah, I love it. So DePIN, we're going to explore DePIN. DePIN is just this massive space. I am so pumped up about DePIN. I think it's one of those perfect marriages in the world of like needing infrastructure and incentivizing people to build it for you. It's like this incredible thing for startups. But let's keep talking about Peaq for a second before we dive into DePIN at large. When did Peaq start?
I think this is a very difficult question, but this would be a question best to ask the founders. I mean, it always depends on how you define starts. So the founders have been working on the, let's say, wider vision of what Peaq is, the Internet of Things, the economy of things, as we tend to call it, in some shape or form already about 6 years ago. So this is an endeavor that hasn't just started. It's been in the working for a very, very long time. And then on what is Peaq today, which is basically this L1 blockchain infrastructure, I think in this shape or form, it's approximately 3 to 4 years now, which is quite a substantial time, specifically in crypto, as we all know. So there have been a lot of lessons learned, a lot of things that have been tried and done in the past, and ultimately hard work kind of paid off, and we are at the beginning of the journey still, but this is how it all came to Peaq as we know it today. Yeah.
3 to 4 years in crypto is like a decade or something in the traditional world. And now Peaq just, like the token, just finally started going for sale at the coin list, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before that, this was just, things were just being built in the background. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been working on the network. We've been building the infrastructure for a long time. Our first foray was with our Canary network, our Kusama network, Crest, and we launched Crest last year. And our motto is on Crest we test. So all of the infrastructure, the modular features, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, have been tested for some time on that Canary network. So yeah, it's been a long time coming, and we're very excited to be where we are.
And so I don't want to get too into the weeds right away, but Crest, I mean, I know a lot of people have already purchased Crest. They've been into that little bit of a world. Some people have been stacking it because there is the airdrop, which maybe at the time this comes out, that snapshot will have happened, or maybe it's already happened. I don't know. Is that continued to be the plan? Like build things, break things on Crest, then launch them on the main chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what we're hoping DePINs are doing is going to have real world impact. I mean, that's one thing that I say a lot is we're a project where, our DePINs are going to have real world impact to real world individuals with real world projects. but you don't want to go out into the real world and make big mistakes and break things.
Right.
So you said it perfectly. On Crest, we test, we break things, we make things better, and then we launch them on the Peaq Network. So that is the continued plan. And we do have a lot of plans for Crest as a network. It's got a lot of utility outside of that, and some things that we've recently announced that we can talk about later, or you can find on our blog. But it is a critical part of our ecosystem, and one that we really value.
Yeah. I've had people, because I've talked about Peaq a little bit, especially around the hype of the coin list offering, and I've been talking about the airdrop, and people are like, oh, I got to get the Crest, but I don't want to hang on to it after the fact. I'm like, no, this has it's like an entire second project within the Peaq ecosystem. So it's maybe it's probably worth paying attention to that. So we've been talking about little touches about DePIN. So why Peaq is all about DePIN? Is an L1 for DePIN? What is the opportunity with DePIN? What do you see there?
I think it depends on how you frame it, right? The terminology DePIN has expanded a lot in the last couple of weeks and months. I think we see that every time when a big narrative pops up, but
it didn't even exist like a year ago or something.
It became a term approximately 8 or 9 months ago, but if we pin it down to the most essential value proposition, it is the first time that Web3 is actually becoming real. And it's the first time that you can talk to traditional decision makers in the traditional industries with arguments about how value is created in the real world, and making them understand what Web3 is really all about and how it can actually leverage value. Because ultimately what we're talking about is breaking up centralized silos in order to incentivize people to become infrastructure providers. An infrastructure provider can mean a whole lot of things, right? It can mean physical infrastructure. It could be you providing your vehicle as an autonomous driving car, right? This could be one thing. It could be your EV charging station. It could be your mobile phone data. Many, many different things. And if we think about how business typically works and how people have learned about business, it's you're centralizing for efficiency, right? So every time you're building up any type of infrastructure business model, you have tremendously high capital expenses in order to actually ramp that up. And then in order to maintain that, you have relatively high operational costs. Now, in DePIN, for the first time, you're basically outsourcing that to the community. So the community can actually provide a node in some shape or form, right? It can be, again, a car, it could be the charging station, compute, whatever it is. And then they get rewarded for becoming a part of that infrastructure. So it entirely changes the incentive mechanism on how you're establishing infrastructure in the real world. And it allows you to establish a supply side much quicker than you could even imagine in the traditional world. And this is something that I would say even the traditional economies, the traditional industries have actually woken up to and acknowledge. And this is why I, in a sense, believe that DePIN is kind of saving Web3, right? Because for the very first time, it is not a purely speculative aspect that is attached to crypto. We know that there's many more aspects that are valuable, but it's difficult to kind of mediate that. And in DePIN, that becomes evident. And then to maybe give a hint towards where things are going, I think if you look at the trajectory, we are moving towards a machine economy, right? We're moving towards a world where the majority of value is going to be created by autonomous machines. So where does that leave us as humans, right? If we are not the ones who are creating economic value, then we are left out of the equation. But in DePIN, where all of us can own shares in these infrastructures, shares in these machines, there is a more equitable economic system that can be ramped up that could be tremendously important 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said, that DePIN is making Web3 real. I think that's a really great way to describe it. And maybe, James, you could talk to this a little bit, but talking about chargers and cars and cameras and phones with microphones and using all this stuff, or even setting up nodes or various things for DePIN. How is this different than the traditional model for building a business? How does this change things?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we say, and one of the things that really drives the vision for this project is, we want to bring the economy back to the 100%. We talk a lot about the 1% in today's economy and the wealth disparity. And I think how this changes things is it really brings the production of wealth from these, we see it now, as Martin said, in a centralized fashion, but we're bringing that back to the 100%. So anybody can participate. We are really reducing the barrier to participation for these projects and these opportunities. And we are tackling some of the bigger issues that people are becoming aware of, like data security and data privacy, on top of that economic layer that we've been discussing.
Yeah. I mean, maybe to add to this, the challenge is evident not only in infrastructure. If we think of social media, the way these business models typically work is you as a end user, you provide your data to the platforms for using the platforms, and then you basically see the advertisement that basically is a result of what the data is sold for, right? And the same is true with every type of data-related business model. You're providing all the data from your smartphone usage, but you're not rewarded for that. So what we have with DePIN is an incentive mechanism that allows you to actually monetize the value that you're already creating in the real world, but that is at the moment only going to the 1%. And you can do that in a very secure environment, which entirely changes the way people will think about a business going forward. And this is probably what makes the DePIN narrative within Web3 so special. Because for the first time, it's not only happening in the virtual world, it's actually happening in the physical world. And this is extremely promising. And obviously, the economic value attached to that is massive. It's in the trillions. And I think everybody understands it when they start actually looking into it.
Yeah, when you get down to like some of the simpler implementations of DePIN, like let's say an app that takes a little bit of data, you send that data to whatever the crypto company is, they sell that data. I've gotten pushback before. It's like, oh, why would I'm not going to give these companies my data or whatever. And, my retort to that is always, well, you're doing it already.
Right.
This is the first time in our history that we have a mechanism for getting you paid for that. You actually are opting into it willingly, and getting paid for that data or whatever. Whereas currently, you're almost certainly signing some agreement when you sign up for the service, and in there, hidden deep inside is we're going to sell your data, whatever, and you see none of that. And yeah, maybe in some circumstances, the rewards you get for the data are very small.
Yeah, it's a fraction.
Right. But it's better than nothing. But two, you're talking about the 100% around the globe, even pennies or dollars or whatever. And then when it comes in aggregate, that's like a game changer. That can be like a life changer. Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything else like around the kind of equity of the, how equitable like this is for people that you want to expand on, but that's one of the things I find just fascinating by it.
Yeah, and I think what is even more fascinating about it is that even though these companies are giving ownership away, this approach in many cases is much more efficient than the traditional approach, right? Think about how much time it takes to actually ramp up a number, let's say 100,000 sensors all across the world, how cost inefficient that actually is. And then to scale that in a sustainable fashion and to maintain it is really difficult. So this is something that you can do in a couple of months in Web3 because every single individual is incentivized to provide that data structure and these data. And this is, again, where DePIN is so different to many of the other Web3 use cases. This data has tangible real-world value that many of the large enterprises, many of the large players in the existing traditional economy actually need and are willing to pay for. So it's, in a sense, a win-win situation because they will not be able to get that granularity of data in a centralized environment, while at the same time, the community, the users, are for the first time actually benefiting from it. And so it's kind of turning the existing economic model upside down, which is very, very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, one of the benefits of DePIN and one of the benefits of this sector is that we're providing an education to people, because a lot of people, as you said, don't understand where their data is going, what it's being used for. I often give the example that when you are driving using, one of the major navigation services that everybody knows and loves, and you stop at your favorite fast food restaurant, you will get ads for that fast food restaurant down the road on your social media. So, linking the use of our current data to what is actually happening in the real world is really enlightening for some people. And then saying that there are opportunities within DePIN to not only take control of your data, but be rewarded for providing that data. And in a lot of cases, DePINs are conscious of, what data is being provided and give you the opportunity to either it's already completely, anonymous, or provide you the opportunity to choose which data you are providing to that service. And again, either way, getting rewarded for it. So I think as we move forward and people learn about what is actually happening in the real world, and that there are opportunities, through DePIN to really take control of that data, take control of what you're doing on a daily basis, and have some incentivization behind it, that you're right. This is much larger than a lot of people believe.
Yeah. I mean, we can even talk numbers, right? There is estimates that say if you take the entire revenue created in the internet, approximately 40% of that revenue is created by intermediary services, which basically is the overall value proposition of Web3, to say maybe we don't make the pie bigger, but we take away a bulk of the revenue that goes to centralized institutions and redistribute them amongst those who are actually creating value, which is the projects and the users, right? Now, 42% is a massive number. And if you think about any kind of, let's say, B2B SaaS business model that you typically use, could be an Airbnb, could be an Uber, there's millions of different business cases that apply this business model and that take away such a bulk of value at the moment. So every time you're using a business model where you believe that you're interacting with another individual, you're actually not. There's, in every single location, there is some kind of centralized institution involved in that as an intermediary. Now, this is something that you can break up using DePIN infrastructures. And this is massive because, again, the value probably doesn't change in terms of the total amount, but what changes is that of the 100%, 42% is redistributed among these two parties. And this is massive because, again, it's a big incentive for people to participate on both sides. It becomes much more lucrative for an Uber driver to actually be an Uber driver, right, in such a direct to consumer business model, while at the same time it is cheaper for any end user to use the service. And this is, again, something that even traditional business administration graduates immediately understand. And this is something that in Web3 typically is not the case.
Yeah, the value proposition of if you're a startup or something, and you need to build some kind of infrastructure, you need some kind of network, you need some way to actually support the product or service you're offering, and you can stand it up virtually overnight by having everybody else do it for you, and you incentivize that. I mean, that's a pretty big game changer. So, obviously, after we've been talking about this, DePIN is a lot of opportunity here, but the question is, does it need a layer one of its own? And if so, why? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons to look at specific chains. I mean, if we want to look back, a few years ago or a lifetime in crypto, we had very few chains and they were all generalized. And as we've evolved over the last few years, we've seen the rise of several specific chains. And DePIN specific chains, I think, serve a very important purpose, because we're talking about a new industry, a new sector. We're talking about something that has existed in one way or another for a few years, but really, as you said, we're in the infancy. And so being a DePIN focused layer allows us to do things like provide infrastructure, provide tooling, provide features to DePIN projects that they can't find anywhere else. We have the focus, and we have a general Web3 ethos around us that is specific to DePINs and what they need. So one of the things that I think is very unique with Peaq and with our team is that we have a lot of two-way communication with the projects that we are onboarding, and we ask that question: what are you looking for in a network? What features do you need? And so the result of that is one of the new features that we've recently launched, which is our modular DePIN functionality, which is a series of features that are available to anybody that wants to come in. They're pre-built, they're tested, they're available. You can come in and you can build, your DePIN out a little bit more using something that, like, as you said, has already been built before you, has already been tested. Another feature that I think a lot of the DePINs that I speak to on a regular basis are very excited about is the ability to share data and to collaborate, internally with other projects. So think about a navigation project that comes in and has a map. Eventually, they're going to want to add things to that. They're going to want to add layers. Maybe they want to add, sound data so you can, look at your map and see, well, is this park loud? Maybe they want to add charging stations. They're in an EV and they want to be able to see that charging station. And there's a lot of opportunity for these projects to come in and utilize the projects that are already in the ecosystem. And we talk about layer one ecosystems a lot, but I think with DePIN, we're talking about something that's far more robust than a typical layer one ecosystem because of that collaborative nature, because you can come in and you can truly work with other projects in the ecosystem, or the Peaqosystem as I like to call it, and take advantage of that data that is available. And therefore, as you said, not only can we as a specialized layer one provide the infrastructure and meet the infrastructure requirements of new projects coming on board, we can provide data requirements and we can provide that integration and collaboration between the different projects. So you don't have to do it all. You come in and focus on what you want to do and then work with everybody else to fill out the rest. And I think that's really unique in the Web3 space. And something that, those are two of, I think, a lot of different benefits of having a very specialized layer one.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think this is tremendously important, because think about a general purpose blockchain where any type of business model is launched. So, I mean, of course, there are synergies as well, but the way you can leverage synergies with related projects is much more efficient, right? And also the way from A to B is much shorter. So this is the first aspect. And then I think one aspect that is significantly underestimated is, at some point when we want to see the Web3 vision come real, that ultimately means is bridging it to the real world, or making it accessible to the real world. Now, talking about DePIN, the customer side, the demand side, is not coming from the Web3 communities. The demand side is coming from enterprises, big corporations that have massive appetite for data and information, right? Now, where we are now, and I mean, we've seen a number of corporate collaborations in the past, but where we are now, it is still very difficult to convince stakeholders in the traditional world to actually commit and partner with a Web3 company, simply because there's many things that they don't understand and that they kind of find odd or consider a bit sketchy. And of course, I'm talking about meme coins. I'm talking about all these kinds of things that are happening and accumulating a lot of value, and rightfully so, because it is a specific Web3 related mechanism that you could consider a liquidity business model as well. But if you don't understand it, and if you have a negative image about it as a corporate, it's going to be much more difficult for you to actually partner. Now, when you're in this specialized environment, you can have a polished image, in a sense, that makes you more credible in terms of the real world value that you're providing. And then ultimately, talking about a layer one more than any other project is an ecosystem, right? So the best value you can provide as an ecosystem towards the outside world, towards those that are actually becoming, let's say, the clients or the customers of your project, the better. And I think this is where an L1 for DePIN and L1 for real world business models has a tremendous cutting edge that can be leveraged significantly in the future.
So you're saying that meme coins are not like the best investments in the entire world?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm obviously not giving investment advice, but what I can tell you is that I not so long ago I used to work for one of the largest media enterprises in the world and led the Web3 activities there. And still, the way Web3 is perceived is something that people really still shy away from, right? And then for them to actually work together with projects in the Web3 space, they are always looking to adjust and mitigate the risk, right? And if there is a lot of value accrual towards other types of business models that they don't understand, then obviously they will be more hesitant. Now, if you can have that clean-cut brand, it makes it easier not only for the L1, but for every single project that is building on the L1 infrastructure.
And I think something you both kind of touched on a little bit that I want to dig into a little bit deeper. The idea of a layer one, of one chain to rule them all, like this mass, the Ethereum of the world, whatever, where it can do anything. Conceptually is kind of a cool idea, but I feel like in practice, in the real world, it's massively inefficient to do that. It makes more sense to me that for specific applications, you would have specific chains that just, why would you have the same tool for everything? So with that in mind, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room is there's Ethereum, there's Solana, which both have DePIN projects being built on them. Why Peaq over those two?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a couple of the main points of that, which is, from the beginning, Peaq has been focused on DePIN. So from the beginning, we have really tooled our network to be the most efficient for DePIN applications. I mean, we can talk about the fundamentals. The fundamentals are comparable with any of the top chains as far as TPS, theoretical TPS, cost per transaction. Those are available on the website and they're very comparable. But I think, what we've talked about a lot is our general philosophy and ethos when it comes to DePIN. I think having a general, aside from, what I've spoken to already, the way that we approach our partnerships and the way that we, have the customer centric, point of view with our DePINs is really unique, and something that like you said, you can't really do with a generalized layer one, because it's a massive beast to be able to cater to your NFT projects, to your DeFi, to your meme coins, to your DePINs. Whereas
Ethereum's not going to suddenly tomorrow go, oh, we got these DePINs coming on, we're going to completely change some of the code. Like, that's just not going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so we're providing an opportunity to really give a customized experience to each DePIN, and I also think that to go back to that synergy, that collaborative nature that we're providing, that's something that we can offer that a lot of the other chains can't. And so there are a lot of reasons to look, at Peaq and look at DePIN specific layer ones when coming into a project and saying, well, where's going to be our home?
And is that what you just said is fascinating? I think is such a big selling point. It's like, hey, if I'm building a DePIN project, I'm going to build on Peaq. I'm going to get this kind of more custom one-on-one kind of service. They're going to be able to cater to me. Is that sustainable though? Will that continue forever? Will you just get enough devs that you can support that when there's not 20 DePINs built on Peaq, but 200? Like, what does that look like going into the future?
I mean, the question is extremely valid. And I think the answer is actually quite simple. So first of all, we always say the home for DePIN. I mean, this is a word, but there is a lot of meaning behind that. That means there is a support system in place, right? It makes people that join the ecosystem welcomed. It provides them with not only the tech stack that they need, but the overall support system when it comes to how do I grow my ecosystem? How do I actually meet the right people that can help me? Where do I get the right advice? And I think there is layers of granularity to the extent that you can provide these kinds of services. So really it is about us building up a system that is capable to scale with us scaling. And there's different tools that you can apply, right? I mean, obviously it is not scalable to say you need support in your growth strategy. And we sit down every single time, every single day with like 1,000 projects. Yeah. This is not going to work, but there is systems that we can put in place that support a larger scale of ecosystem projects, and they still are being taken care of. And this is exactly what we are building up. And this is a significant value proposition towards, and you mentioned two great projects in the space. It is easier to scale within a niche, right? And calling DePIN a niche, I think, is already a stretch, right? But nevertheless, it is easier to scale when you have multiple synergies that you can leverage. Plus, when you have lessons learned from other ecosystem projects that they can share with the projects that are maybe starting out new or that maybe want to pivot. So for us, really, it is about, when we say we are building this home for DePINs, it's about establishing scalable support systems across the board. And this is something where I find it is much easier to be doing that when the needs of the projects are aligned, pretty much. And the more we see, the more we adjust on our side, the more we support, the more general lessons we can actually provide that we can make accessible also to a scalable amount of projects.
And already Peaq, and I don't want to dig into this just yet, but I definitely want to talk about this in this discussion, all the things being built, because it's fairly impressive how much is being built on Peaq. But what does that process look like right now? Is it they hear about Peaq and they're like, it's a place, it's an L1 for DePINs, I got to go talk to them. Is there outreach? Like, what does that whole process look like right now to build out this ecosystem?
Yeah. At the very beginning, I think there was a lot of outreach. As with every project, when you start, you have to get your name out there. You have to get that brand recognition. And, as Martin said earlier, we've been focused on this goal for almost 4 years at this point. So, there was that stage, but now we've passed that stage, and now our discussions internally when we're talking about this thing is about how do we approach that scalability, because now we find that projects are coming to us. We are dealing with the incoming inquiries far more frequently, and while we still want to have that component of outreach, at this point, to be honest and humbly speaking, we can't, because we have so many projects coming to us. And I think it's because there are a number of factors that we've talked about already that is leading to that, with the specificity of the chain, with the outreach, with the reputation that we have, with the partnerships that we have, everything from where we've started to where we are today, I think has led up to that point.
I had at one of my previous jobs before I went into the world of entrepreneurship and working my own, would call things like that, where you have more people than you can possibly help coming to you and demanding a happiness problem.
Yes.
It's a problem because you got to figure out how to deal with all of it coming in, but it's a good thing. That's where you want to be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the challenge is not that much many projects coming to us. I think the challenge for us is that we have a certain, let's say, set of values that we're always trying to apply. This is throughout the organization. What we always look for is good people wanting to build good things with the right set of values. And a part of this right set of values is us taking the time for most of the projects. At the moment, we're still trying, obviously 100% of the projects, to sit down together, to speak to them in person, via a video call, understand what it is that they're building, and then guiding them towards the right direction, which makes the scalability angle a bit challenging. But this is something that, as good as possible, we're going to try to maintain, because what we've seen, obviously, with many people in our team being entrepreneurs, some of them have had their own entrepreneurial endeavors in the past, you see that sometimes maybe project initially doesn't look that promising, or you cannot support them to the extent that you would probably like to, but still you can give advice. Still you can sit down, take just a couple of minutes of your time and guide them towards the right direction. And who knows, maybe 1 year later, they are coming back with a revised approach that actually makes a whole lot of sense. And we can try as good as we can to accompany them through this process. And I think this is what is going to be something that is going to make Peaq special in the long run, right? Of course, when we're talking about thousands and 10,000s of projects, you cannot talk to everyone individually, but nevertheless, we can make sure that we have these functionalities in place. So in a nutshell, it's not that much outreach at the moment, which is a thing that is really nice. But for us, we will always try to live up to our own expectations and make sure that anyone who's coming in with a serious intention to build something that is built to last, then we are always there to support and see to what extent that can be. Yeah.
And speaking, you've talked about the team a little bit. How big is the Peaq team right now?
Yeah, so
you would know better.
Yeah, I mean, we have been expanding as quickly as the project itself is expanding, and I think we are almost at 40 people.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stats, 40 people employed with Peaq, with EOT Labs working on the Peaq Network project, and you mentioned 20 projects. I think by the time this comes out, we will be well over 30, on our way to 40. One thing that we have with this abundance of projects coming to us is the ability to onboard projects. And something that you've mentioned earlier is, we haven't even launched yet, and we have an incredible amount of people building on Peaq and projects, and some really good ones too.
And you've both talked about some of the features that Peaq offers, but maybe ones that have not been discussed. What are some of the other things that Peaq offers that is really helpful specifically to DePIN projects that makes it attractive to that sector?
Yeah, so I think there's two more that I'd really like to highlight, and one of them, and they both address fundamental issues with DePIN. And one of the fundamental issues that we have, and that we have across Web3, and it's, we talk about scalability. When we go back to Web 2 and Web 1, there have always been scalability issues, and there have always been compatibility issues. And so one of the main features, and one that we're very proud of, is our Peaq ID. And Peaq ID is a machine ID that gets put on every machine that's on the network. Regardless of the project, this is a standard protocol, a standard ID that allows machines to talk to each other without an intermediary across the network. So we can have machines from one project accessing and interacting with machines from another project across the network. And this, leads us down the road to the fact that while we are a layer one, we are as interoperable with other layer ones as we can possibly be. I think this is one of the fundamental, things about Peaq that really attracted me to the project when I first came on board, was that we live in a world where, I mentioned before, 10 years ago, we only had a handful of chains, and everybody has been focused on their own chain and been very siloed. And as we see this proliferation of general change, of specific chains, of projects, and we start to get real world utility, we've seen people try to tackle that problem with oracles and with, great projects that are bridging between chains. But with this Peaq ID, we're able to transact and interact with machines from different chains. So we have Peaq ID palettes for EVM compatible chains, for Solana, for Cosmos, for Polygon. So projects that are building on those chains can still take advantage of a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the features that we have. And so that general approach that, we want to be interoperable with many of those larger layer ones that are in DePIN already is something that I think is really important.
So being able to communicate across the network like that, from machine ID to machine ID, needs a network. How does the Peaq network function? Is it validator nodes? That's what's operating the main network of the entire L1. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we are built on Polkadot, so we're taking advantage of a lot of the infrastructure and the relay chain for those Polkadot fans out there, and so we can inherit a lot of the properties that allow that communication. For Peaq itself, we are a validator-based chain, so we have a series of validators, collators, and delegators that are providing those services. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, maybe outside of the tech side, when you asked what is it that is interesting for projects, I think already we have a modular support system that is in place. So what we really do is we try to sit together, specifically once we agree to onboard a project, and once we've defined where and how we can actually support and help them, and then we get into this support mode by really tailoring our support efforts, right? Not every DePIN needs the same thing. Some need advice in terms of how to ramp up the supply side. Some need advice on how to ramp up their demand side. Some maybe need access to hardware, which we can then provide through our enterprise network. For instance, we've been working very closely with Bosch, which is the largest sensor manufacturer in the world, which is a very good relationship that we have. So depending on what you need, could be branding, right? It could be even for founders that probably, and this is something in DePIN that we will see increasingly are coming more from the Web 2 world, you will probably need some advice on your tokenomics, and then we will sit down together and provide a support system that is quite modular. And this modular support system, again, provides everything that is part of the term a home that you need in order to be nurtured to become successful. So this is something that I think we're really proud of because it's a continuous effort. It's something that's being ramped up consistently, and it's something that also lives off of the good relationships and partnerships that we have with some of the leading investors out there, with obviously some of the enterprises. So you can consider it a, let's say, holistic support system that I think is quite unique.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bosch, and I know, and just from memory, I remember there's like Airbus maybe, and
there's a MasterCard card announcement,
and there's car manufacturers in your ecosystem. Exactly. So I want to shift gears now. Peaq I'm excited about Peaq. I think there's an incredible opportunity there, but it's really the peak of the iceberg, if I can make a joke and analogy there, because there's so many things being built on Peaq. So can we explore some of that? Like tell me some of your favorite things or some of the coolest things that are currently being built on other projects.
Yeah, there's many. I will start, and then I think we can ping pong, or I'll just hand it over to you because you speak to them. I think almost every day, also in public, which is maybe something we can also tell the community to tune into in the future. One project that I'm particularly hyped about is Silencio.
I'm also hyped about Silencio. I'm talking to them on the podcast, I think, later today.
Yeah, perfect. Excellent. First of all, again, it's a fantastic set of founders, which I think makes them special. But then also the business model that they've kind of kickstarted is something that is counterintuitive, because I've never really thought about the problem of noise pollution in the past. I just when I kind of started thinking about it, I realized like every single time I feel stressed out or anxious or whatever, I like to go to the forest. It's not far from my home, so I just take a walk because it's quiet. And then I realized, okay, this is actually something that is becoming, specifically in big cities, noise pollution is becoming an issue that has consequences, and these consequences can be health related. These consequences can have a significant impact on your mental well being. And then I discovered Silencio. That was before I joined Peaq, obviously. And I realized, okay, what they are doing is basically they allow me to just use my mobile phone. I don't need to have any complex setup process. I don't need any hardware. I can just download the app and measure the noise in the city or the place that I'm in, right? And it's not only me doing it. It's thousands and thousands of people providing a holistic map of noise pollution around the globe. And this is very interesting because if we think about what you can do with this type of data, and if it's for me, it's easy to say, look, maybe I want to move and I don't want to move to a noisy area. I want to go to a more quiet area. I can actually check that with the data that is available. And as we discussed earlier, this is not possible to ramp up in a short amount of time. This is something that you can only do in Web3 when you have the right incentive mechanisms in place for people to actually participate in the network. So this is definitely one project that I'm extremely hyped about, and that has been in the Peaq ecosystem for quite a while. Very, very good relationship with the team and the founders, and I think there's great things to come for Silencio.
One of the things I think about with Silencio specifically is like just thinking about that data and collecting that data in a Web3, pre-DePIN world. Like you have to have a company that decides they want to go do it, and then you have to like get all these sensors and microphones and stuff, and you're probably going to hire people, and those people are going to go like to different cities. It's just incredibly inefficient, incredibly slow in a teeny tiny data set. But with Silencio or any of these DePIN projects, if you have in this case you have a phone with a high quality microphone, you now have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of people around the planet who have phones that you can now incentivize them to open it up, run the app, get some points, maybe get a sweet airdrop in the future, and get this noise data and just start collecting it. I think the last time I looked, their like noise data, the next biggest out there in the world, which is just normal like company collecting this stuff, it like eclipsed it many times over just in a very short period of time. And I think that speaks like volumes to like the power of DePIN and why it's so wild. But James, I jump over to you for some favorites on the
you stole my favorite because I'm a avid user of Silencio myself.
Got to get up that leaderboard.
I know. I like to call myself a DePIN degen because I'm trying to get as many DePINs on my device as I can. And before I go into my example, I think what we're talking about is really what is important about DePIN as far as bringing this technology into the masses is concerned, is because all you need is a phone. A lot of these app-based data collection services are so accessible and the interface is so familiar to a Web 2 user that we're not trying to do what we did in the last bull run, which was pull Web 2 people into a meme coin environment, into an NFT environment. We are producing high quality apps that Web 2 users want to use because they see the value. And the example that I always like to give with this is kind of a multi-project example, which really highlights a lot of my favorite projects. Everybody uses navigation software in this day and age. I mean, I don't with my 2001 Jetta, which I love, but everybody has either Google Maps or Apple Maps or one of these large navigation software. So Mapmetrics is one of the projects that is building on Peaq that I'm very excited about, a project that is providing that navigation software with anonymous data and that incentivization. But to give people sort of the big picture of what DePIN really can do, we have to imagine, Mapmetrics as one component of a multi-DePIN experience. So if you want to picture yourself in an EV that you have rented from a car sharing app, maybe it was tokenized on Tenio, and you're using navigation software and you want to plot your route from point A to point B, there are on Peaq Network Fetch AI agents that are available that can now integrate with that, can analyze that route, go into your car, find out, well, when do you need to charge? They can then communicate with another DePIN, charge XYZ, which is going to, increase the accessibility to charging stations and have those mapped for you. So now you have an AI agent who's communicating with a navigation app, with also a charging app, and with your car sharing app, to make that user experience very easy and very accessible. And so, there are too many projects already on Peaq for us to pick favorites. We do have our favorites. We love them all. And what I really get excited about are when I see these obvious synergies between these projects.
Yeah, actually unfolding, yeah.
Because that's where it really becomes powerful. And I can imagine users like all of us here who have these apps on our phone. Not only are we able to take advantage of this efficiency and make our lives easier, but now we are earning. We are earning from Teneo. We're earning from that tokenized EV. We are earning from using the charge station. We are earning from using the map, the navigation software. We are earning all of these things, and then it becomes tangible. And these are applications that exist today. So as you said, we've got all of these amazing projects building on Peaq, and we haven't even launched yet. So I'm so bullish on the project in general because of where we are now and how much further we have to go.
It's really hard to pick favorites. Like there's so many really good projects. I think the beauty is that they are all providing actual solutions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like every single project that we could talk about is providing an actual solution that is relevant. And I remember back in the days, I think around 2018, that was like the first time when people started discussing the value proposition of blockchain. Many times you would hear the sentence, blockchain is basically a solution for problems that don't exist. And that's not the case anymore. And I think the ecosystem projects that we have are all perfect examples for this. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple more that I've covered on my channel that I know are being, built on Peaq Natix, which is pretty cool. Another thing is use your smartphone. If it has a good enough camera, you're collecting this data as you drive, which is pretty cool. One I just received the gateway for, which hasn't even actually launched yet, I don't think, is Chirp. Which I'm a little leery about going into the world of IoT again because I was in the world of Helium before that. But what they're doing is pretty interesting. That's the IoT, but on a more consumer level, mixed with some like long range network, like neighborhood level Wi-Fi, which is pretty cool. I mean, are there any other ones? To be favorites, just some that come top of mind. There's some applications you think are interesting that are being built on Peaq.
Yeah, one of the coolest ones, I think, one of the newest ones as well that was launched at Token 2049 is Ex Machina, so a machine tokenization platform. And I think, having a tokenization platform that's going to allow more autonomous machines to get brought onto the network and then providing fractionalized ownership to their user base, they're really, again, bringing that opportunity to the masses.
And it's a clear economic value proposition again, right? I mean, we had that was really cool. We had in Dubai in our booth, we had the Robo Cafe that was tokenized by Ex Machina, right? So basically how that would work is
like a robot's waiter or
it's a robot maker? That like you have an interface and you say, okay, I would like to have an ice cream, and also I would like to have a coffee, and then you just push the buttons, and depending on what you want, the robot makes it for you.
Yeah.
Cool.
So now if you think about it, like you would probably say, okay, where's that a Web3 case? But obviously, such a machine in and of itself is quite expensive, right? So the way that works is you, as a community member, you purchase a share of the machine. So if I want to open a cafe, I want to scale, but I don't have the capital necessary to pay the capital cost, you're basically outsourcing a share of, let's say, the revenue that this machine is generating by selling a share of the machine. So every single time the coffee is made or an ice cream is sold, me as a community member, I'm actually getting a share of the revenue. So I can actually participate in the value creation of a RoboCafe. And this is, again, a use case that is easy to understand, because if I want to scale my business at the moment, I will need to hire people. I will have fixed and operational expenses that I need to cover, and I need to then manage depending on the demand and how my business is running, if I can actually keep these people, if I need to lay off some people. In that case, you can scale gradually, and you can, just by basically kind of redefining the share that you're giving away, you can scale up your business. And this is something that works with robo cafes, but obviously the vision is that it works with many, many other cases as well. So that's another great case.
And seeing the robot in action at Token 2049
was crazy.
Dubai, and the community was given an opportunity to own a fraction of that particular machine. I mean, again, as a fellow DGen, I was on board first in line, and I was able to benefit from that, so I was able to get, they ran it on our test network, so Crest. So I was able to earn Crest as people were paying with fiat, they were tapping their credit card, and every time somebody bought a coffee, I knew I was going to get a fraction of that.
Well, the robot's making people things, and you're earning passive income from said things happening.
So, and I mean, this is the vision of the economy. Cool. This is the vision of the economy of things. To go back on where we started, like, why is DePIN relevant? DePIN is relevant because what we've seen on a funny micro scale with this cafe, not too far away from today, will be the actual reality of how our world functions and operates. Because machines will become increasingly intelligent. Machines will be guided by AI agents. These AI agents create other AI agents that will create economic value in a much more efficient way, most likely, than we can, right? So the way to make the place equitable is to make sure that we can actually have a share of the value that is created. And seeing that in action now, in a tangible way, is actually quite impressive, because it makes it also easier to understand the trajectory that we're heading to.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people who watch my main channel and a lot of people who watch the podcast, like, we are interested. We're nerds. We're geeks. We're interested in the tech, but we're also very interested in, like, how do I make money with this thing? And that's what's so cool. I mean, everything we've mentioned, like, you run Silencio on your phone, you run Natix on your phone, you run the Chirp gateway, you run a map metrics device in your car, like, all these things. Again, it's powered by data. It's an economy of data. You're the person providing the network of the data collection, and you get incentivized to do that. So not only can you buy into these things, you can buy into Peaq because you hope that it's going to be successful. The chain is going to catch on as it has been. It's going to appreciate in price, but you're also jumping into all the various things because, I mean, it's like passive income opportunities built on these things that have actual real world value because people need this data, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the big differences, and an important one that maybe we don't talk about a lot that you just mentioned, is the fact that with a lot of, meme coins, a lot of NFTs, a lot of previous, utility projects, there was a heavy upfront investment in hopes of a return. And with passive earning and with this ability, there's no heavy upfront investment. You have to download an app and suddenly you're earning. So, it's as risk-free as you can get in crypto.
It's risk. Yeah, it's extremely risk-adjusted, at least, because ultimately, if you think about it, you don't have any speculative component. Whereas with the NFT and meme coin investment, the driver of your investment decision is a speculation. Here, it is data that has an actual existing demand from people that want to buy it. So there is already, like, a number. We don't always know what the number is, but there is a number attached to it that is already priced was already priced by the market, which is, as you say, it's a good point to point out. Yeah, it's a fundamental difference.
And there certainly is, like, a speculative element here, because people want to buy these things, so they hope they're getting it early and they hope it goes up in price.
Of course, yeah,
but the cool part is, unlike with, like, memes and other things that only have a speculative element, DePIN stuff, if they're successful in getting clients and companies and individuals to buy the data, which many of these already are making real revenue, if they're successful in doing that, well, then they now have a real fundamental reason for the token, or what would be in the traditional word, the stock for the company, to go up, which is, I think, a really compelling reason to be paying attention to this space, because that real world, like, application and need and use.
Yeah. But fundamentally, when I say there is no speculation involved, is when you use the app, there is no upfront investment needed, right? It's except for the couple of minutes of your time to
it is. You're tokenizing your time, which is a big shift in how we think about, the economy of blockchain. Because before, with speculation, like I said, there is an upfront cost, and now we're just rewarding you for your time. So you are losing that.
But even if there is an upfront cost, which a few of these are, I mean, a lot of them, you get the free app.
Yeah, the hardware.
But even some of the hardware, it's like, the most expensive one I've jumped into recently, which was Chirp, is like a $900 gateway, whereas you compare with other things out there, many thousands of dollars, tens of thousands. It's like, Yeah, some of these might have a little bit of associated cost, but again, if it catches on, real world application, that small amount, or the map metrics one is like $120. I mean, very, very small. It's very approachable. The barrier to entry is much lower, and the potential upside is considerably higher because of that real world element, which I think is pretty cool.
We've all thrown $120 into our favorite meme coin and watched it go away. So with this, you get something tangible, and yeah, you get to participate in the economy of things. And I think, we've touched on this a little bit, but one thing that's really important is as Web3 native individuals, as people who are in tune with blockchain and understand the possibilities, we've always been talking about how do we bring that next, wave of people into the environment. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the podcast, but having these really accessible apps, having these really Web2 friendly apps is how we don't necessarily bring Web2 people into the Web3 ethos. We are bringing Web3 through enterprise, through these companies to Web2. And the model that exists, that we're talking about, exists already in Web2. We all have our favorite coffee shop. We all have our favorite hotel chain, and we all have an app where we can collect points and trade those out. We're talking about the same thing, except now we get incentivized more, and we can be more assured that our data is private and secure, and we get to make those decisions like we talked about earlier. So when I think about DePIN as a whole, we have all of these value props, and we have all of these features and functionalities that make it really attractive.
Yeah, the value proposition of DePIN is so clear that, as you say, you don't need to convince Web2 players to pivot or go stronger towards the Web3 route. It's actually more of we show you that Web3 is actually making your life easier, and this is something that has hardly existed before. I mean, there have been some cases, I would say, in the content industry where that already became a bit more visible, but on such a scale, accessible to everyone, I think this is probably the first time.
DePIN is that sector of crypto that, again, I was joking at the beginning of it. The word didn't exist a year ago, but DePIN has existed for multiple years. It just now got this fancy little acronym,
the name,
whatever. But I feel like, and the reason I'm so bullish on DePIN, why so much of my portfolio is centered around DePIN project, is because I feel like DePIN is the final thing we need to erode traditional companies and traditional services and stuff to finally start making their way into Web3. Like, they haven't had a clear path. I mean, there's exceptions to that, but like in terms of like product, service, we need network, we need data, all this stuff. DePIN, it just makes so much sense for onboarding those people. So I'm stoked. Like, obviously, I'm very excited about Peaq. I'm an investor in Peaq, so highly biased. Don't buy into Peaq just because I'm talking about it. But if listening to these guys, made you excited about Peaq and what they're building, if you can tell our listeners, like, what can they do to be involved, or where should they look, or what should their next steps be?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to become involved in Peaq, definitely follow us on all our socials. We're at Peaq Network on Twitter or X. Find us on Discord through our official website, peaq.network. I'm on the mic once a week doing a Discord community AMA where you can come in and ask any question about any project. My goal as a community manager with a Layer 1 is to make sure that our community is aware of all of the amazing projects building on Peaq, because we have so many amazing projects. And, getting our community to support those projects, I think is paramount. So if you do want to learn more, if you want to become involved in the economy of things, you do want to learn more about DePIN, follow us on our socials, and go to our ecosystem page on our website and see all of the different projects, all the different integrations, and check them out, because we've got some really exciting things. And as we mentioned earlier, every week we're making, 2 or 3 announcements of new projects that are building in the Peaq ecosystem. So
yeah, if you look at that ecosystem map, you will probably be pretty impressed.
It's, I remember way back when it was a much smaller page, and now it's like we can't fit it in one page anymore. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, and also, of course, like if anyone is building in the space, feel free to reach out. You can always, I think, get in touch with us via our socials. Of course, you can find us on X, you can find us on LinkedIn. Feel free to mail us through our homepage, and we are very excited to see how many of the fantastic listeners you have out there are challenging the status quo already, or are looking to challenge the status quo. So very happy to speak to those people and to get in touch.
Yeah, of course. And then one last thing, I don't know when, what the announcements will be by the time this podcast is out and the timing. And maybe you can't even answer this, but there's certain people in certain countries that couldn't take advantage of the coin list offering. So is there any timeline for Peaq when it will be on other exchanges? People can get access to the token?
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot answer that question.
That's correct.
Yeah, the answer is soon. The answer is, that information is going to be shared within our Discord and over our Twitter first. If there's one thing that I feel we've done really well, it's value our community and make sure that they're kept in that loop. So, come be part of the community, ask those questions. And when those answers are allowed, we're absolutely going to give them as soon as we possibly can.
But maybe this year?
Absolutely this year.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate you both coming on the podcast. This was a blast. I love talking DePIN. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you for having us.
Yep. And thank you for listening. See you in the next one.